Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it happens to be that you're tuning in to watch this podcast. I hope you're having a great day. This is Doug Plucknett, and you have found the Leadership Connection today. I am honored to have a guy that I worked with back several years ago at BASF in Geismar, Louisiana, George Galvin. George, how you doing today?
Hey, excellent. Thanks for having me, Doug. Appreciate it.
I'm trying to remember how many years ago that was we worked together. I was thinking that it was 2008, maybe.
Yeah, so more than a decade. Can you believe it?
Yeah. Or it could have even been 2007. I can't remember. I'm thinking it was right after I went over to Allied for a bit. And
Okay.
we did a bunch of RCMs there in Geismar, Louisiana. I want to say we started out thinking we'd have 12 weeks and we ended up with 8, but that's just my memory, and who knows? Now that I'm 60, it's not.
I would say it's pretty good. I remember, you lay it out and you're like, wow, this is going to take a while, and then you kind of pick up some efficiencies as you've gone along, and I think that was a pretty successful project in the end.
All right, so at any rate, the things I do remember about Geismar was being somewhat familiar with that process because I'd done something similar, worked as kind of a similar area at Kodak, but more than anything, the great food of Louisiana. A couple nice places that we'd hit for lunch, and I know that I probably told you this story. When I travel, I'll go places and they'll say, "Hey, we got a nice Italian place here." And being from New York, where there's a lot of really good Italian restaurants, I tend to go, yeah, I really don't care for Italian, right? Because I know it's not going to be what I'm expecting. And Geismar, that was one of the first places we went, and I went, oh, this is really good. It was a nice little place. So that and charbroiled oysters, holy smokes. So at some point, we really should talk about leadership and what's going on. But if you could, George, tell the listeners a bit about your career, where you went to school, the companies or jobs you've worked in, the roles you've worked in, so on and so forth.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a chemical engineer, graduated from Villanova University, and basically joined BASF right out of school. So I've been with BASF now 24 years, and my first assignment was actually in Germany at our flagship site in Ludwigshafen. And I remember just being overwhelmed by the size of that facility, and from there, got on with their PDP program, where you kind of figure out exactly where you fit in, what you like to do. But I'm at heart, or at least for the first 2/3 of my career, a manufacturing technology guy. Spent a lot of time in the TDI plants and the isocyanate arm of BASF. So on various different leadership roles. I started as an engineer and kind of grew up there. And ran the MDI plant for a few years as a production manager, and then lately, I say over the last 6-7 years, kind of transitioned a little bit into more of a strategic role, but something that blends more of the business aspects of it, and putting together projects and economics and business development for our petrochemical side of the business. So it's been a wild roller coaster, that's for sure.
All right. So if for our listeners that are not familiar, those folks this is one of the things I found very strange about your company. Almost everybody that works there refers to it as BSF, and that A somehow drops out, right? And I'm told that comes from BASF over in Europe. That's kind of where that started. That the BSF,
yeah.
You did
so.
me and I'm like,
it's an efficiency thing, I guess. But yeah, so BASF is Badisch, which is a region in Germany where it started. The A is aniline, which was one of the key raw materials and dyestuffs manufacturer. We still make it today for the isocyanates. And then soda, which is caustic soda, and Fabrique, which stands for factory. You know, so. But there are a lot of folks that never even run across that within BSF. You know, so it's worth the Google search for the history. You know.
All right. And so, at what point in your career would you say you were first recognized as a leader? And it might even be before a career. You know, I've had people talk about, you know, it was middle school and sports, and you know, but at what point in life were you recognized first as a leader? What were you doing?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me, it's always been there to some extent. You know, whether it was playing hockey or running track, I was captain of those teams, and it kind of felt natural to you know to look after the team and look after its interests. But in some ways, at first recognized as a leader, I mean, I think I came into like really my first role within BSF was putting together, you know, the new TDI plant there in Geismar right around 2000 or so, and you know, whereas I'm the lowest of low on the engineering scale, but you know, you were looked to train the staff, train the operators, and kind of share your knowledge to basically make sure that you had a you know, a successful startup. And you know, you can be a leader at really any position that you find yourself, and that's that was clear that the expectations were high, and you needed to show up and deliver. You know, so I would say really right from the beginning with BSF for sure, but I had a lot of practice beforehand, and ultimately I think it made a difference. I think it helped prepare me for some of the more formal leadership roles, you know, as I kind of grew in my career.
Right. You know, one thing I recall in terms of your leadership skills was, you know, in doing that large RCM event. I can't say that I've done a ton of those. I'm one of those, and I think I told you this when we first met. I'm always nervous when somebody wants to do 8, 10, 12 weeks in a row because I know how much work that really builds up in terms of having to implement. And so I get nervous about that. And typically when you have something that size and you go in the first week and you get started and you ask that question, okay, so this is powered by, let's say, a hydraulic pump motor, you got a valve bank, and I see that line on the P&ID. Do you have a drawing of that? And in most cases, the room just kind of goes silent, and then I go, oh no, because you know what you're into. It's like, okay, we're into the mystery thing. We're going to have to get up. We're going to have to walk out. We're going to have the tour guide thing and take a bunch of pictures. And you had all that stuff organized. You know, I don't think there was anything that I ever asked for in that RCM that you didn't have the answer for. And I don't know whether that was you directly or one of the engineers that you had working in that, because it was between the two of you that would go to the laptop and pop it up on the screen. I remember we used 2 projectors so that we could do that, right? And that was really, you know, that type of leadership there. You know, if I'm always one, I hope when that's going on that a boss walks in the room, right, so that I can say, hey, look at what your guy's done for me, right? So you look at that, we thought 12 weeks, it was 8 weeks, it was really stuff like that. That type of leadership makes a huge difference, right? Organizational skills and making people accountable to have it there, right?
And I think, you know, that was a good team effort. We were blessed. I mean, the plant was only, you know, 6 or 7 years old at that point, probably, right? But having the discipline, because it really is that, to prepare your systems ahead of time and have that knowledge or references available, really pays dividends, on and on down the road, right? So, we pulled that up in 2008. I guarantee you can still go back and grab, a lot of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Oh, we need the drawing for that. Boom, we could probably get it. And you see plants where maybe they weren't as disciplined for whatever reason. They're under a time schedule or something else, and they make a trade-off. That trade-off costs you immediately, and then it costs you again and again and again down the line. And a lot of times people don't do that math, or they're willing to trade the future for the now, and that's risky.
All right. So looking at your career to this point, are there a couple people that you'd like to mention that maybe were mentors in your career and if so, what are some of the things that you learned from them that you still use today?
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about this, and probably one of my first assignments, kind of walk in and I met this guy, Matt Iacovino, and he was a consultant that basically had done all his work within this BSF plant, and he's a civil engineer, and I remember him clearly because he was quite the character. He had been a gunner on a bomber in World War II, so by the time I met him, he's 70 something, and he's like, grab your stuff and come out to the field. I'm going to treat you. You're going to learn something today. And we curse like a sailor, and he's like, you need to get down. You need to know the guys at the line because they can make or break you, right? And he's telling me this as we're walking out, and we get out there, and he just drops F-bombs and just curses the guys out in the ditch. They're building a foundation for him. And then they all laugh, and they're like, hey, Matt, good to see you, whatever. And he had such a rapport with these, guys tying rebar for him. And that just stuck with me from, Jump Street, right? Because if you're going out there, you're never going to see the equipment the way a mechanic sees the equipment. You're never going to see the way an operator sees the equipment. And rather than make it kind of a almost adversarial position, I always found out, hey, what are you guys seeing? What's going on? What do you think it is? And I've asked that question a few times in my career, and people look at me like I have a second head. And they're like, well, I've been here 5 years, and no one's ever asked me. I'm like, well, I'm asking you now. What do you think? And, sometimes they're on target. Sometimes they're, they got a wild theory that, doesn't pan out. But unless you ask that question, you're never going to get the absolute best. Right? Because then they're just giving you, whatever, their 12-hour shift or something like that. But, it's really when you get everybody kind of aligned and say, hey, look, it's not an ops problem. It's not a maintenance problem. It's, this team's problem. We got to fix that pump. How are we going to do it? And, I think that really, kind of takes away some of that like I said, adversarial positioning between ops and maintenance, because in the end, everybody both wants the equipment to run. That's the key thing. So, but that really, Matt really stuck with me. I've had countless other mentors too, but here it is now, 20-something years later, and I still think that he kind of altered my approach, from really day one.
That's fantastic. And when you think about that, it becomes a give and take. When you build that relationship, right, then they start coming to you to ask questions to say, why did we do this way? How come we used this type of pump as opposed to that one, right? And so the learning
Right.
ends up going both ways, right? And I can tell you that, in my career, there was a couple of those engineers that we used, as tradespeople, we said, there's a guy that's not afraid to get his hands dirty, right? Come out and see what's going on out here. And actually, sometimes some guys even lended a hand, right? What can I do to help? When it's in a crisis situation where you're going, oh man, right, if we don't get this done, we're gonna have some stuff freeze up on us, and then we're gonna have a real mess, right? So those that were always
exactly.
appreciated. Anybody else that you could think of?
Yeah, I think you know, as I got a little bit further in my career, you know, I got the opportunity. Ken Bordelon was a vice president that you know really saw something in me, and you know gave me the opportunity to go overseas for 3 years. So we lived in Brussels, and I'll never forget. He said something to me too. You know, here I was, you know, mid-20s or something. He's like, hey, you know, you have a worldview, and you're pretty confident in yourself, and you think like, you know your way is the best way. I'm going to tell you, 6 months into this, you're going to turn and say, oh, my way is not always the best way. And I'm like, Ken, you don't know what you're talking about. Have you met me? I'm pretty hard-headed, right? So, and, you know, 6, 7 months later, I'm like, oh, I see what you mean. And you know, to be honest, that was really, really something too, because there I am in a spot where, hey, they're, as a courtesy, speaking a language I can understand, you know, and you know, they basically they could wait you out and just ignore you for the whole time you're there, but you got to figure out a way to get through, and how do you make a difference, and how do you influence. And I think that that really like slowed me down a little bit, and made me a little bit more intentional, a little bit more deliberate with, you know, either how I ask questions or how I come across, or, you know, sometimes you have to use that hard head to kind of push your way in there, you know.
Yeah.
So I mean, he was another, yeah, he was a you know, to take a risk on me, because it's really his credibility on the line, where they're pushing, you know, a kid into Europe, and you know, it's a sink or swim kind of thing. I think that was really cool, and I was actually just emailing him this week, and I'm like, yeah, that Belgium experience is, you know, the high bar. So we measure everything. Was it as good as Belgium, or not as good, or a little bit better, or, you know? So it was something really cool, you know. And then probably I have to credit another delegate, Andre Wehrman, who he took a shot at me. I had been in an interview and looking to do another technical kind of director safety role, and he turned to me and said, hey, well, you know, have you ever considered the business? And I told him, for sure you don't want me out there trying to sell knives to customers, because that is a huge error, you know. And he kind of laughed, and basically he was the one who really opened the door for me to move from a technical manufacturing role into a more business role. And you know, I can't thank him enough too, because you don't know what you don't know, but he was able to really kind of crystallize, hey, you know, great that you're doing all these projects, but why are you doing them? And, you know, well, in the end, it's how does it benefit BSF or our joint venture or that kind of thing. And to be able to build the business case, you know, it's less technical, don't get me wrong, right? But in the end, if you're just trying to solve problems, you're using different tools to solve similar problems. And you know, at the heart of it, that's all it is. And being able to communicate, being able to listen, being able to interact, and maybe ask that secondary and tertiary question, like, well, why do we do that? Why do we want to do that? What's it mean to you, Doug, customer? You know, what does it? And to be able to have that interaction, I mean, it was great practice to, you know, to learn in the plant and how to interact with folks, because interacting with customers is the same. They have needs and wants, and you have to uncover them and how do they fit together. I mean, that's what I really liked, you know, as I joined the business. So I'd say, like, you know, I'm sure I'm leaving out, you know, half a dozen or more
Sure.
other mentors, but those are the three key ones off the top that kind of course corrected, you know, my career throughout the day, you know.
Very good. So along the same line, George, I know you've read a number of books through your career. Are Is there a book or two that you read that made a difference, or a course that you may have taken along the way that you'd like to speak to for our listeners?
Yeah, I think I've taken the policy, or as it's my system, really is to kind of always be learning. And I've read a bunch of this standard influence books, whether it's How to Win Friends and Influence People, or First 90 Days, or What Got You Here Won't Get You There. All those are, like, let's say, prerequisites to kind of feeling it out and getting in there. But maybe a more unwritten, or let's say one that really key pops out over the last years, and I recommend it to everybody, is by Scott Adams. Do you know him?
No.
Scott Adams he developed Dilbert, so he still does the Dilbert cartoons, right? But his book, one of the key ones, and it's probably now 5-6 years old or something, How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably, if it's 100 pages, it's just 100 pages, and it's written fantastic, and it talks really specifically about, hey, even when you try something new and you make an error and you have a result that's not good, you're going to learn skills along the way that will help you, in your next opportunity. So, shake it off. Failure's part of the process. Get back to it. And he's got all kinds of good little, one whole section on persuasion and influence, which, when you get down right to it, whether you're trying to influence the ops team and the maintenance team in the trench, or you're trying to influence your customer over here to say, hey, this is a good deal. People are people, and they're motivated by, their needs and wants. And I mean, I hand those copies out on a routine basis. So.
Very good. All right. Looking at your career to this point, what would you say is your greatest success?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think earlier on I could point at objects or projects and say, like, man, that was a top-notch win or whatever. And maybe as I matured, or I don't know if I'll ever grow up, but as I think my biggest win, I think, thus far, is really now influencing people and cultures. And specifically, I grew up in the TDI plant, and I was the production manager of the MDI plant, and I think that was my biggest win there, is basically to kind of change the perception or the culture of that team, to basically be focused more on a almost continuous improvement basis. Let's get to the root cause of the particular problem, rather than get really good at prepping that pump for maintenance. And I want to say that now even that is 5 or 6 years old, and now as I move a little bit further in my career, it's like, how can I make it easier for the folks who are just coming into BSF or just learning, can they avoid some of my pitfalls, that I ran across, and how can I shorten their learning curve? And I make it a point of reaching out and basically, trying to be the mentor that like Andre or Ken or Matt were to me, and I think those are probably my more long-term successes, is like when you can influence either teams or people to do things they probably didn't even think they could do. I think that's probably even more powerful than, oh yeah, great, you solved that pump problem,
Yeah, it's really, when you see that light come on and that all of a sudden somebody got what you're talking about, right? And when it goes that bright, you know they're going to use it, right? There's a really powerful thing there. It's really, and that's probably what changed my career was that, because coming up as a tradespeople, I can tell you without a doubt, when you're an apprentice, those journeymen love to watch you fail. They can't wait to cut up a crooked piece of pipe or something that's not plumb, or tell you it's the wrong size, or you use the wrong bolt or gasket material, and you just go, well, you came here 20 minutes ago, you saw what I was doing, then you walked away, and then you left for 2 hours and let me do this, and now you want me to take it all back apart, right? And all of a sudden you reach your career, you go, what's the point of that, right? Well, you got to learn the hard way. No, not really, right? I can see 20 minutes to go, okay, what you're doing, that's not the right way, and here's the reason why. Can you see that? If you can't see that, I'm going to let you continue on, right? But if you see what I'm talking about, right, and you understand that, then you got it, right? And being able to do that as a leader and a mentor to help people avoid that pain, and that's really what it amounts to is, and I can tell you that was the big difference for me transitioning from a tradesperson to being behind a desk. Is a tradesperson, you accomplish something every day, and as an engineer, sometimes it takes months, right? To not work out right, you just go home going, oh, what was I thinking, right? It's a great thing. So George, I think
though. Sorry, just one last point on that, Doug. I think you got, as a leader, you got to know whether that individual who needs to learn the lesson can learn the lesson by somebody point and say, hey, that's not a good idea, because of X, Y, and Z. Some people are happy to learn that way. And other people, you just got to let them crash straight into the wall and help pick up the pieces at the end. And knowing when it's like, okay, I'm going to let them crash, but not so bad that it's going to cost me $3 million or whatever, right? You got to know that where's the boundary conditions. So.
But when you have that one that comes in that says, I know everything, right? then there's a point in time where you go, okay, so I'm done with it. I'm done with the talk that we were about to have. Carry on, right? Anyway, George, it's been a pleasure today. I think back fondly on the bit of time we spent together. I'm shocked that wasn't your greatest accomplishment at RCM. I'm just kidding, of course, but was always honored, and I did brag a bit about when you do that much and then actually get it implemented. That's a big deal, right? It makes a difference. So I've enjoyed having you today. It's been great catching up.
I don't know if you had that. Yeah, no, that's perfect. Thanks so much for having me, and we'll kind of go from there. But it's been great.
I somehow knew that in the world of BSF that you'd end up one of the big guys. I think you're not even done yet. When we call and say, "Hey, come on back over to Belgium," that's a pretty good sign, right? So, good talking to you, George, and we are going to sign off. This has been Doug Plucknett with the Leadership Connection. Have a great day.